And welcome back, everybody, to Wildlife Cake and Cocktails. I'm your host, Yanni Torcola. We've got a very interesting and a bit of a different show for you coming up today. We're currently driving through the Gold Coast Scenic Rim area, heading towards Cedar Creek. We're very actually fortunate and lucky enough to be invited to the Threatened Species Recovery Hub's Early Career Researchers Conference. So it's up here in the beautiful scenic rim of the Gold Coast, and there's going to be some of the Threatened Species Recovery Hub's amazing PhD students and researchers, theme leaders, and just general amazing brains up there. So we're hopefully going to get up there and have a bit of a chance to have some brief chats with some of the researchers that are up here for this fantastic conference. And of course, we've got our phenomenal and intrepid producer, Christian Summers from Summer Sound Solutions with us. How are you doing, man?
Cruising, Yanni. Really looking forward to this, man. We're very fortunate to be invited to this event today by TSRH, and we're definitely going to take advantage. There's going to be an absolute plethora of interesting topics to be covered by our 50 plus PhDs and postdocs that are going to be there this evening and during this whole week. Yeah, so we're super lucky to have this opportunity. Who could pass up, a chance to go into a room full of so many smart people? But again, a little bit of intellectual inferiority whenever you're in a room full of PhD students and postdocs and people working for TSRH. But guys, I do urge you to check them out on Twitter at TSR_Hub. That's the Threatened Species Recovery Hub. You'll be able to see all their awesome projects there and all of the their goings on from the conference as well. I think there's been a few photos coming up. You can also check out the National Environmental Science Program at NESP Threatened Species. I think you can see them on Facebook there as well. So the Threatened Species Recovery Hub, part of the National Environmental Science Program, and they work really hard in research and management of Australia's threatened species, which we do have one of the higher extinction rates of any country in the world, partly because we have we have so many endemic species with these very, very tiny and restricted ranges and distributions and very, very sensitive ecology. So, it's on us to try to mitigate some of that pressure that we're putting on these species. And Threatened Species Recovery Hub are one of the leaders in research and management in doing so in Australia. Yeah, across Australia, yeah.
Yeah. So look, we're very excited. We're maybe 5-10 minutes out from Cedar Creek where the event is going down, and I guess we're super unprepared. We're pretty much just heading in and seeing who we can corner with our microphones and talk to us about wildlife and conservation, and it's going to be a blast. I'm super excited about this one. Christian, you?
Absolutely, Yanni. Absolutely. It's going to be great sort of corralling all these scientists around. As you know, I'm an audio engineer, not a scientist, so this is always a bit of a laugh for me.
Oh, look, it's going to be fun, man. I'm coming straight out of work. I'm still in my wildlife catching gear, in my khakis and long sleeves, and you've got your nice production suit, so at least one of us is looking crispy today, hey?
That's right. I'm dressed like a media person, not a scientist.
Dressed
today.
to the nines, as always, the way Christian does. All right, no worries, guys. We'll talk to you guys soon once we're on site at the Early Career Researcher Conference for the Threatened Species Recovery Hub of the National Environmental Science Program.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! All right, talk soon, guys. Bye. All right, Christian, here we are. We're at Thunderbird Park up at Mount Tambourine in the lovely Gold Coast Scenic Rim area. We're in fact surrounded by lorikeets, noisy miners, and a bunch of other really cool birds here at Thunderbird Park. I recommend everybody come down and check it out. It's absolutely beautiful. But Christian, we're here and about to go head off into the conference and see if afterwards we can maybe corral some people into chatting with us. What do you reckon?
Oh, mate, that's the plan. That's the plan. And I'm sure they will be more than keen.
Yeah, no worries. Well, we'll see how we go. I know a lot of these people are very busy, but, you know, they do some amazing work here. And the more we can kind of, I guess, share with you guys some of the amazing projects that Threatened Species Recovery Hub and the National Environmental Science people are doing, the more the better, hey. So, yeah, I guess we better get into this conference. I think we're already a little bit late trying to find a place, but...
While I'm fixing my hair, yeah.
Yeah, while Christian's getting his hair all done up and got to look nice. All right, no worries. We'll get in there and we'll switch the recorders back on in a little bit once we have some other much smarter people than you or I to talk to. All right, man. No worries.
Cool.
All right, we're here with Dr. Rochelle Stephen. She got a PhD from Griffith Uni and is currently at the University of Queensland, where she's an ecologist, also working with BirdLife Australia. She's one of the researchers for Threatened Species Recovery Hub. Is that correct?
That's right.
Awesome. And you work mostly with birds?
I have previously worked mostly with birds, and my most recent work has been looking at citizen science more generally with threatened species across Australia.
Right, so look, there seems to be quite a few like really awesome citizen science projects coming out. So Frog ID, Herp Mapper, of course. There's some really phenomenal things coming out. What's the latest citizen science for bird people that I guess Twitchers would be interested in?
So look, there's quite a lot of citizen science happening in the bird space. BirdLife Australia is by far and away, I guess, one of the biggest organisations working in the citizen science space in Australia for threatened species and biodiversity more generally. They have a whole stack of programs for different types of birds in different areas in Australia. Probably one of the most recent developments was the bird data launch that links to the Atlas of Australian Birds. So it gives people the ability to submit data to the Atlas using their smart device out in the field.
Very cool. So that's very similar to the Frog ID app that we were showing you guys fairly recently, I guess.
Yeah, that's right, except that with the Frog ID app, a lot of that's based around recording the frog calls. So when you're identifying frogs, their call is pretty unequivocal. So they're recording those calls. It's being sent through to the experts at the Australian Museum, and they're identifying those frogs that way. The Bird Data app actually does require the citizen scientists to identify the species on behalf of BirdLife Australia in the field and do a count, and they're submitting that as a list actively online.
Right, so it doesn't have that bioacoustic element, but you're kind of relying on the people out in the field to do a little bit more work for you.
That's right, and look, to be quite honest, bird watchers as a general rule are actually quite competent at doing this.
Oh, those Twitchers, they're always at it.
They definitely are, and it's quite a huge part of their life, and they do take it quite seriously. They're a fantastic bunch of people to learn from and to, I guess, absorb a lot of that energy from as well.
Okay, very cool. And you also work pretty extensively with fire ecology and plant management, is that correct?
Not so much the fire ecology myself, but I definitely have done quite a bit of work with plants in Australia. So I've done a lot with Kosciuszko National Park, alpine species, but also more locally in southeast Queensland, I helped to develop an app called Grow Native, which helps people select native plants for their gardens that are native to southeast Queensland.
Oh, that's super cool. Look, I garden and I grow a lot of my own vegetables, and I love to do the permaculture thing. So that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Where can people get their hands on that one?
So it's Grow Native, GRO Native, so no W, and that was a project that I did in collaboration with Griffith University and a social enterprise consulting firm here on the Gold Coast called Natura Pacific. Now that was funded by the Queensland government. The app is free, so you just jump onto Google Play or the App Store and download that one. There's over 350 species that you can choose from that are all in cultivation, and so if you can get your hands on them at some time of the year, there is some seasonality involved, but definitely you can pump in your postcode and it will tell you what species belong in your postcode.
Wow, by postcode.
That's right.
That is super cool. So wow, you really are all about the citizen science thing, obviously.
I'm all about getting the general public involved in nature appreciation and conservation. So with Grow Native is not so much about collecting data, but it's definitely about taking action that benefits biodiversity on your own land, and I'm all about making that happen.
Yeah, cool. All right, awesome. And what are you up here doing at the conference? What have you been enjoying up here so far?
This retreat's been fantastic because it's given us a chance to meet a lot of our colleagues that work across Australia. So I'm actually relocating to Perth next week for the extension of my project, which is going to be on western ringtail possums and public engagement and citizen science. So it's, for me, given me an opportunity to meet some of the people I'll be working alongside over in WA.
All right, to like network a little bit and have a bit of a softer landing in Perth.
Absolutely, because I'm going to be a long way from home. I've grown up in southeast Queensland. This is going to be an exciting but nerve-wracking step for me, and it's been great to have that professional and personal development up here.
That's fantastic. And look, it is always challenging moving away and moving so far to do some of these amazing projects. So it must be really beneficial to meet some other TSRH people from Perth and get their experience of what it's like out there.
Absolutely, and we're all super passionate about threatened species and conservation and making research actually have an impact on what's happening out there with our biodiversity. So it's great to be around like-minded people.
Very cool. Well, we're going to try and find a few more and actually get out of this corner because our producer Christian is making some very funny faces. There's a deceased corpse of some kind of animal somewhere, and it's blowing right into where we're trying to record.
Yeah.
You can tell he's not exactly a field biologist. He's not handling it so well.
Yeah. Need to get you out in the field more often, toughen you up.
Yeah, he's in his nice suit, but he can't handle the smell. So we're gonna see who else we can find to talk to. Dr. Rochelle, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No problem, Yanni. Thank you.
Cheers. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Bye. All right, we're here with Mark Freestone, another PhD student with the Threatened Species Recovery Hub. In fact, he's a student of Dr. Nushka Ryder, who was on our last show talking about Melbourne's spider orchids. Mark, how you doing, man?
Oh, very good, thanks.
Excellent. Now, you're enjoying yourself up here in lovely, sunny, warm Queensland?
Yeah, a little bit more humidity than I'm used to, but it's very exotic.
It is. It's actually a lovely area up here on Mount Tamborine. We actually did a podcast up here looking for leaf-tailed geckos with reptile expert Scott Iper not too long ago. So you're in a really lovely area.
Yeah, it's nice. I can't help but think what interesting orchids are hanging around here in some of the rainforests up here, but it's perhaps the wrong time of year.
No, but you still do see some pretty cool epiphytes and some obviously epiphytic orchids hanging up in the tops. Yeah. They're not flowering, but still just being awesome.
Yes. Orchids are always awesome, so...
All right, and Mark, you're a PhD student at the moment with ANU and the Royal Botanical Gardens in Victoria?
Yeah, that's correct. Studying leek orchids, trying to work out what's going on.
No worries. And leek orchids, we did hear a little bit about this when we spoke with Dr. Nushka, but can you tell us a bit more about the leek orchid themselves?
Well, they're small ground-dwelling orchids. They emerge from the ground in winter, flower in spring, mostly occur in southern Australia, and they're I think they're quite beautiful, but you could probably describe them as humble-looking orchids. They've got small flowers, sort of often a flower spike with anywhere from 5 to 30 odd flowers on them. Right. Their leaves look a little bit like grass, so they're hard to see, but there's lots of species, about 140 odd species across WA, southeastern mainland and Tassie. So
a little bit humble and plain, but quite diverse.
Yes, lots of species, lots of endangered species as well. There's almost 40 species listed on the federal government's Environment Act, the EPBC Act. And some of them are right on the brink of extinction. There's one just down the road from where I grew up. It's down to less than 10 plants left in the wild, total worldwide population. So it's on the brink of extinction. Wow,
and that's as we spoke about with Dr. Nushka the other day. Is that particularly because habitat loss and degradation, or the lack of pollinators, and they need that mycorrhizal ground fungi, or is it just the combination of all those things, as usual, kind of causing a lot of pressure on these plants?
Oh, it's habitat loss. Yeah, that's so
that's the main factor, habitat loss.
Yeah, historic clearance for agriculture. Almost all of the endangered species grow in these small remnants in areas that have been vastly cleared for agriculture. But that's all in the past now, and so they're down to small populations, and a lot of these populations, despite our best attempts to manage them, are still declining. And really the only hope we've got of saving at least the most critically endangered ones is a captive breeding and reintroduction program like what Nushka does with the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria. So we'd love to implement such a program for our leek orchids, but the problem they have is that we don't know how to grow them in cultivation.
Right. So it's a little bit harder than some of the others where you just get some thinid wasps. You know what the pollinator is. You know what the mycorrhizal fungi they need are. What's the challenge with leek orchids?
Well, it's not the pollinator. They actually are one of the few orchids that produce nectar on their flowers. So,
okay.
Yeah, they're visited by a wide range of pollinators. They don't have that specific relationship like the Melbourne spider orchid does.
Yeah, the old magic bullet thing.
Yeah. We think it could be something to do with the mycorrhizal fungi. There's a few potential theories that we've got as to why the seed just doesn't germinate when we try and sow it in the lab. And one of them is that the fungi that live, these mycorrhizal fungi, naturally, the symbiotic fungi, live in the roots of the adult wild orchid plants.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which makes things, well, that's the same for all orchids, but it makes things a little more complicated. So usually what we would do is we just go into the wild, carefully dig and extract a small little piece of root from a wild plant, bring it back to the lab and grow up the fungi in Petri dishes, essentially, and sprinkle on the seed and that we get orchids germinating. But that doesn't happen for some reason with leek orchids. We're not sure why. We're not sure if they use a different fungi for germination than the fungi that live in the roots of the adult plants, which is something that's been found overseas, but never in Australia. And there's also could be problems with seed viability. So because these orchids produce nectar, they often get self-pollinated. So
okay.
The insects that pollinate them transfer pollen from one flower to another within the same flower spike.
Right, so that's not exactly helping genetic diversity if you want, gene flow and things like that.
Yeah, precisely. They're the sorts of preconditions that predispose a species to have problems with their seed viability. So we're looking at that. We've got some nice cross-pollination treatments that are just underway at the moment.
Trying to up that genetic diversity count a little bit, get some extra alleles in there.
Exactly. But we're also interested to see what happens if you cross-pollinate an orchid, which naturally is self-pollinating. So, yeah, that's going to be quite interesting, and we'll shed a lot of light on the seed side of things. But assuming that that's not the silver bullet entirely, then it's something to do with this fungus-orchid relationship that's likely to hold the answers.
Wow, so a lot of mystery there still for you guys to figure out. That's fascinating stuff.
That's why we're in research, isn't it? To try and work out these problems and find answers that will help save endangered species like these leek orchids.
Well, dude, that's absolutely fascinating, mate. Mark, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I think we're going to run around and see who else we can corner. But thank you so much for chatting with us, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No worries, thank you.
All right, and by the way, they can check out the Royal Brisbane Botanical Gardens at RBGV_. RBG _Victoria on Twitter, is that correct? Royal Brisbane.
No,
Royal Botanical Gardens.
Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria. Yeah.
RBG. Yeah, Victoria on Twitter, I believe.
Yeah, you can check out the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria website or Twitter, or our Instagram feed. There's always a few orchid posts that pop up from time to time, talking about the work that we're doing.
No worries. All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your conference, mate. We're going to keep running around and seeing who else we can find.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Cheers, mate. Bye. Okay. And we're out here with Leslie Robertson. She's a PhD student at the University of Queensland. I understand you're a bit of a marine biology type of nut.
Yeah. I was a competitive swimmer for my whole life. So I've been in the pool, staring at a black line going back and forth for a long time. Luckily now I get to be in the water for fun and for my career, so now I stay far away from pools, and I love the ocean, and I study the ocean and work with the ocean.
So a water baby from way back, and now getting to do it as a bit of a career.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and I understand you've got an interest in cetaceans and sort of large marine creatures?
Yeah, so fisheries are the major threat, more than anything else, for a lot of big, cute, or really cool animals that we're concerned about, like a lot of whales and big sharks and turtles.
Yeah, okay. So obviously, fisheries impacts, fisheries are pretty much in decline globally in a lot of areas. Is that kind of the same thing that's happening to Australian populations?
Yeah, Australian fisheries are pretty good. The industrial fisheries.
Okay.
So on like a global scale. So they're pretty, there's been a lot of work done to improve their sustainability and their performance.
So they're fairly well regulated in comparison?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. The recreational fisheries, not so much. And there's still that sort of issue with, Australia has that funny combination of like, it's the Commonwealth, but then there's a lot of state pride or whatever you want to call it. So
the tragedy of the commons always comes into the play.
So not all the fisheries are great, but I think Australia could in general be proud of the work they've done with their Commonwealth fisheries. I think that's fair.
Okay, so as far as fisheries management, what are the big issues that Australia is facing as far as you see it at the moment?
Australian fisheries, one thing I'm looking at is there's still a lot of room for improvement. And that can benefit the fishermen as well. So I'm specifically interested in looking at individual fisheries operators. Fisheries are normally looked at as like a whole sector, like a
big blank sheet, yeah.
Yeah, or the Indian Ocean, or long lines in the Pacific Ocean, or the Hawaiian swordfish fishery. And I'm really interested in individual behavior and how certain fishing operators have found their own solutions to these problems. So I'm looking at patterns between different individuals, who catches the most fish they want to catch, who performs the best in terms of not catching what they shouldn't be catching, or not losing their gear, not using as much fuel, and all that. So I'm trying to look at how we could make the whole fishery better by like encouraging those good behaviors and like rewarding what certain individuals seem to be doing well.
Right, that's interesting. So rather than trying like a blanket approach, you're kind of going to each of the individual operators and seeing what management practices kind of emerge out of it, like a big emergent property.
Well, so one reason I say Australian fisheries are doing pretty well is that there have been some programs in the past doing sort of exactly that, like working more on the ground instead of just making more rules, like working with individuals and seeing how one particular vessel would reduce their sea turtle bycatch or whatever it was, and trying to like really go with individual fishermen, and the ones who are really interested and keen then use them as sort of a representative. And so there were some good programs, which is one of the reasons I say Australia is doing really well.
Okay, so there's some foundations to work on.
Yeah, but there's still room for improvement, and Australia has a lot of the waters they're fishing are fished by many other countries that may not be performing so well. So if the findings, I'm trying to use Australia as my case study because there is actually data, but those findings would be applicable to improving the performance of any other fishery in the world, really.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting. Awesome. I guess where can people find you? Do you have some social media online where people can see what you're getting up to?
I do. I've been told that as a scientist today, I can't just hide in my little office. I need to have an online presence, which regrettably I am doing. I really like talking face to face, preferably on a surfboard.
That's much better.
But you can also find me online. I do have a webpage and an Instagram and a Twitter and all that.
Okay, so that's Leslie Robertson, and they can find you on Twitter, Instagram, and all that kind of stuff if they want to follow your marine adventures.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and we're going to head off and see who else we can find to corral.
Thank you.
Cheers. All right, we're here with Natasha Cadenhead. She's a research assistant with TSRH. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Excellent. So happy to have you here. Now, I hear that you did your master's down at the Melbourne University. Is that correct?
Yes, I did about 4 years ago. I finished up.
Okay, and since then, have you been working with TSRH since then, or did you take some time off to actually enjoy yourself post-study?
No, so when I finished my master's, my supervisor, who's now the director of the TSR Hub, Brendan Wintle, he said, do you want to do a couple months worth of RA work for me? And I said, yes, please, because I was desperate to have something when my Centrelink ended. And it's been 4 years, and I've just kept doing it. Sort of every few months we have a discussion that goes, oh yeah, you still interested? And I'm like, yep, you still interested? And then we just keep going.
Fantastic. So you're kind of working in a couple of different research assistant things, or they got you doing a bunch of stuff, or what's the deal?
Yeah, so I work on a variety of projects. Kind of research assistant life is working on lots of little bits of other people's projects and then occasionally getting to run your own. So with the TSR Hub, I do mostly organisational stuff at the theme level. So I sort of organise phone meetings between people and make sure that people within the same sort of theme are connected to each other and know what's happening, and that we're, doing keeping all of our promises to the department and that kind of thing.
Right, so you're in a bit of an admin role, but I find it so interesting that you've got, from 4 years ago, a master's in what exactly?
Well, a master's in zoology, and so it was mostly a modelling project looking at the impacts of changing fire regimes on an endangered skink, the Great Desert skink.
Which are absolutely beautiful, by the way.
I've actually never seen one, so I'll have to take your word for it.
So you've only done the modelling study. You basically, modelling studies are very important, but you don't necessarily need to be handling large amounts of animals when you're working with computer models, I suppose.
No, you don't really, although I did do a short amount of field work up there and found it incredibly valuable to get the landscape context for all of the modelling. You sit there with this data and you've never seen spinifex grasslands, or you don't really understand what it means that the skink is digging a burrow underneath them for protection. And so when you go out there, you can really understand, I see why a really intensive fire would be a huge problem for this animal, and it just clicks. Right.
So look, I guess it's not entirely that ground truthing of the models that you're going out there to do. When you're writing some of these papers, it really does help to have an understanding of the environment, I suppose.
Yeah, it really does. I found that, and also getting to talk to the land managers and just sort of draw on their ridiculous wealth of experience from actually living there and managing things on a daily basis. Right,
so look, you've got this, we've got some phenomenal cicadas and stuff starting up, by the way. It must be getting a little bit later in the evening. So look, I find it fascinating that you're basically doing a bit of admin stuff at TSRH, but you've got this spatial ecological modelling background. Do they specifically pick people with a good, I guess, some kind of environmental background for most of their roles, just so people have a bit of an idea of, I guess, what the people they're managing will be going through?
I think you'll find that almost all of there's not a whole lot of research assistants. It's not really a common job. It's the kind of thing that often gets cut for funding first up. But of the research assistants that are around, I'd say all of them have a pretty strong ecological background, or maybe an economic background. There's lots of different aspects to the project in the hub, and then you sort of just find yourself getting drawn into these more organisational admin roles, which can actually be quite satisfying in and of themselves.
Well, I mean, it is a massive program, and part of the National Environmental Science Program, so obviously a lot there to manage, a lot of people to get together. But yeah, you're absolutely right. They're doing some phenomenal work, some fantastic conservation of, obviously, threatened species. So even if you are just in the office doing admin stuff, it must be hugely rewarding to know that you are helping all these threatened species and all the projects that are helping them recover in the wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think admin gets a bit of a bad rap among researchers. It's not the most exciting part of anybody's job.
No. We all bag it out.
But when you have such a big organisation, it's actually essential that somebody somewhere knows what's going on in each aspect of the project. And so we keep on the researchers' backs, even when they'd probably prefer us not to.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the funding is coming from somewhere. So, efficiency is a good way to make sure that, you get as much bang for your buck. So I guess that does all need a whole bunch of people behind the scenes like yourself.
Yeah, it really does.
Awesome. Thank you so much for talking to us, by the way. Is there anything that you'd like to play? Where can people follow you guys, or TSRH? Should we just tell them to go check out TSRH? What's the TSRH website, by the way?
Oh, that's a good question. I believe it is... Nope, no idea.
Well, just Google Threatened Species Recovery Hub and you'll be able to find them. Natasha, thank you so much. This has been awesome. We're going to see who else we can harangue and corner with our microphones. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks. Good luck.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. All right, we're sitting here with Jana Dielenberg. She's the Science Communication Manager for the Threatened Species Recovery Hub of the National Environmental Science Program. Jana, how are you enjoying our Queensland weather?
Yeah, it's fabulous. I'm enjoying the cool change at the moment.
Yeah, it's excellent. We've got a bit of a storm rolling in, so we may have to head in at some point. But it's nice to just be up here with all the phenomenal Recovery Hub people.
Yeah, it's been an amazing thing to bring all the early career researchers from across the country together to workshop lots of different ideas and share their research. It's been great.
Right, so how long have you been managing the science communication for the Hub?
I've been about a year and a half. The Hub's been going so far for about 2 years, but I came in a bit later.
Okay, cool. And wow, as you know, in your role managing all the SciComm stuff, there must be a whole bunch of different projects to manage there as well.
We've got probably almost 100 projects. So it is a lot to get your head around because they've got a lot of diversity. We've got some that are really on policy, but we've also got ones that are sort of classic ecology of a species. We don't know enough about this species and we don't even know how to find it, so we're working that out. We've got birds, we've got mammals, we've got frogs, we've got plants, we've got big variety. So it's pretty exciting hub to work in if you're a bit of a science tart and you and you enjoy knowing about environmental research.
Yeah, right. Look, it must be awesome seeing, like, even if you're not directly getting to have your hands on all those projects, it must be super interesting to see them come through and see them, from start to fruition some of the time, I suppose.
In some ways, it's kind of more fun for me.
Because you don't have to be slogging it out in the field?
Yeah, I've worked on single long-term projects before, and that dedication to keep thinking about that end goal that might be 1 or 2 years away as you painstakingly
plug away
at that one question, whereas I actually get to find out about every one of the questions and all those projects and all the great stuff that's happening.
So you can pretty much see everything that the Hub's doing at some point and get a bit of a picture of all the amazing stuff that they're doing.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm hoping to, I've got to know it well enough to be able to try and communicate it, because what you really want is to be sharing all the good stuff that's coming out of the Hub. It is largely publicly funded, and so if we're not getting the stories out about what this research is, then we're really sort of in some ways wasting some of that public investment. We want to share this research with as many people as we can, and as many of the conservation groups and state and government agencies and Commonwealth and territory governments that could be using this to improve their environmental management.
Right, and of course, obviously, the more people are aware that the Recovery Hub's doing their thing, the more people will be, I guess, hopefully willing to help out and at least follow what the project's doing and maybe even donate to some of the other projects that are attached to the Recovery Hub or some of the other partners. But, for me, I guess, to have such a big part of the National Environmental Science Program directed towards threatened species is the really cool thing.
Well, you've had people like John Wojnarski on the show, who's one of our deputy directors, and he can talk very eloquently and unfortunately it's a bit depressing about the horrible extinction rate that we've had in Australia in the last 200 years, and many of our threatened species aren't necessarily or are declining, and there are many that we don't even have enough monitoring to know what is really happening with them. But across this hub, we're doing a lot of projects that should give people some hope, some sort of optimism for the future. There are a lot of good projects that are happening even before this hub. There are teams doing tireless work to save species and many champions across Australia. And actually, there's a new book that's coming out next month that many of the people in our hub have contributed to, called Recovering Australian Threatened Species, a book of hope. And
wow.
Trying to really share some of those case studies of the success stories that we've had to date to make people feel like it's not all just hard slog in recovering threatened species. Because if you felt like everything was downhill all of the time, as a government, you might think, well, maybe I should put my money elsewhere. But actually, where we put our mind to it and we make investments and are committed, we've actually been able to do some amazing things in recovering threatened species. So that's great.
Yeah, fantastic. And when does the book come out? Do we know exactly when we can expect it?
The book's coming out in March. It's from CSIRO Publishing, and you can look it up online. But it's got great case studies that should give people reasons to be hopeful.
Yeah, wonderful. That's fantastic. And I guess my other question is, we've met a few of the other admin people and some of the people behind the scenes of the Recovery Hub here a little bit. Everybody seems to have some kind of environmental science background. And you're a geomorphologist yourself, or an environmental scientist. Is that correct?
In my undergrad, I did geography, and then I did a Master of Environment that did some policy, some ecology, quite a bit of fluvial geomorphology. And so I actually worked for the first, 8-9 years of my post-uni career in waterway management in Victoria.
Very cool.
Doing environmental management plans and even managing a Ramsar wetland.
And look, that's fascinating to me as well. With so many people in the hub that have such a background, you obviously have a deep interest in science and stuff in general, but it just makes all the communication and all the background stuff that is being done. I think everybody's got a solid understanding of what the projects are actually about, rather than simply being in the background. Everybody's got a bit of an environmental bent of some sort, whether it's actually an early career in research or just a very deep interest.
Yeah, I think that I feel really fortunate with the team of people who are in the Threatened Species Recovery Hub. Everyone's really committed, and I think when you really feel like your work is meaningful, even if you're doing something that's administrative and you might think, could be sort of boring. I feel this in my own work. Sometimes there's stuff you've just got to do and it is administrative, but when you know the end game is about the whole work of the hub and getting really good research done and getting it connected to the right people, it's pretty easy to feel motivated. Yeah,
the paperwork becomes less of a challenge, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it means
it's still always a challenge.
But, you still feel motivated to get it done because you've got other great stuff you have to get on with.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I think that's it for now. We're going to see who else we can wrangle up and have a chat with. Jana, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for having a white wine out with me here.
Thank you. Brilliant cocktails here on the show.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again soon through the TSRH. If we have any other people to get on the show, I'm sure we'll be having a chat with you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming and profiling the great work that's happening within the hub. We really love getting out the message of the different projects in as many ways as we can, and it's great for people to be able to listen on demand to what's happening.
No worries. And look, we love sharing it as well. So thank you so much again for being on.
All right. Thanks very much for having me.
All right. Cheers, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Alrighty, we're here with Robin Leppert. He's a PhD student at the Charles Darwin Uni and also part of the Threatened Species Recovery Hub Early Career Researchers Conference. Bit of a mouthful. How are you doing, Robin?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. And you're enjoying the you're all the way up from down from Darwin, so you're enjoying the slightly cooler weather down here, I suppose.
Definitely, Brisbane. While still humid, it's a lot nicer this time of year than Darwin. That's for sure.
Man, it's interesting because the Threatened Species Recovery Hub, it's a national program, national environmental science program that they're part of. It is nationwide, so you've got some people from Melbourne who are up here complaining about the heat and humidity, and then there's people from Darwin and all the way up north who are basically either loving it or even a little bit cold by this stage.
Definitely, I've broken out my jeans for the first time in a few months, and I can kind of smell the mold on them from the wet season, but it's nice to get back in them for a change.
Yeah, look, not everybody's out here is walking around in their long sleeves. Like, you seem to be handling it fine.
Definitely. Yeah, I think appreciate this weather a lot more than I do the current wet season climate up there, that's for sure.
No worries. And what part of Darwin are you from?
I'm living in Stewart Park, just outside the city there, which is like right across town from uni. So a lot of people, most people in Darwin live within like a 5-minute walk from uni, but for me it's a 15-minute drive, and in Darwin that's a long way.
Wow. Okay. And what are you studying up there at the moment?
So I'm studying an endangered subspecies of bird called the yellow chat. It lives predominantly on the floodplains of the really big rivers up there.
Yellow chat. What's the species name there?
Yep. Scientific name would be it's Ep.21 tunnii. So
Never heard of it. I've seen pictures of them now, and they're small, yellowish, like really brightly vibrant yellow coloured. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they're dimorphic. The male is super bright yellow, and he has sort of a black patch on his chest, whilst the female, as usual in the bird world, is a bit of a duller version. Still yellow, but a bit more dull.
So I've really only seen pictures of the males then, because every one that I saw, I was like, holy crap, look at that black chest patch and the really bright yellow plumage on them. It was just really stunning. Quite small birds as well.
Yeah. They're only about 9 grams and about 9 centimetres long. I mean, they don't get a lot smaller than the yellow chat. Probably about the size of a finch. And that can actually have some challenges for research, being so tiny. We can't put things like GPS trackers on them because they just don't weigh enough. They can't carry them. To be too heavy for them.
Yeah, right. So just too much of a burden for such a small bird to carry. What kind of stuff are you working on with them at the moment?
Yeah, so the subspecies is sort of under-researched. To begin with, it had only one published paper on it, and we know very little about it still. So I'm trying to do just a pretty basic conservation status assessment sort of to begin with, and then ultimately trying to identify, prioritise, mitigate the threats that we think are facing the yellow chat.
Okay. That's a fun sound. There we go. Yeah. And what are some of the threats that they're currently facing? Is it fairly well understood, or is this something that you're still kind of in the process of figuring out?
Yeah, so we are definitely still in the process of figuring out, but the obvious ones so far seem to be feral pigs that also use the floodplain. They dig up heaps of vegetation on a scale you just would not believe.
Yeah, up there on the floodplains of the Northern Territory, it's a bit of a different thing than the feral pigs that we see here on the East Coast.
Definitely, they can get into really big herds. I've seen probably herds of 200 plus.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and they just hang out on the floodplain like it's a paddock and absolutely tear up all the vegetation, foraging for their roots and stuff, which they eat. And then the other major threat is a weed called Mimosa pigra. Yeah,
Mimosa bush, yeah, very, very widely spread up there by now.
Yeah. So Kakadoo's done an amazing job of keeping it out of the park, spend a lot of money and a lot of time keeping it out of the park. And that's probably one of the reasons why the yellow chat's still present inside the park. But at all my sites outside of Kakadoo, mimosa is everywhere, and I'm still yet to find a chat. So,
wow. So if there's mimosa, you're not finding chats.
So far, yeah. So the only place I've seen them is Kakadoo, and that's my only field sites that don't have mimosa. So that's definitely one possibility.
Okay, so invasive pigs and invasive plants, both a bit of a challenge for the little chats there. Wow. So how are the populations doing? Do you have a good estimate of how the populations are at the moment, or not really?
Well, look, there's a limited historical data on sort of numbers, but anecdotally, they used to get seen from the highway in Kakadoo, which crosses right across the floodplain. These days, it's virtually impossible to see them as a member of the public. They're now in such remote locations on the floodplain. I was lucky enough last year to see a flock of about 40 or 50, and that's probably the biggest group of yellow chats that's been seen for quite a lot of years. Oh, wow. So is that a sign of, was that just luck, or is that a sign of recovery? Are we hopeful? It's very difficult to say because I was out there for nearly 2 months on those floodplains. And
so if anybody was going to see them, it would have been you.
Yeah. And I'd say every day that I was in Kakadoo on that floodplain, I would probably see chats, usually between 5 or 10 per day. And then on just this one day, I saw a flock of 40 to 50, and I never saw a number that big again. So I don't know. They're just having a little convention that day, and I was lucky enough to be there. Wow,
just like you TSR people up here.
Exactly. They're doing what we were doing. And then I rocked up and wrecked it for them. I was trying to chase them around. That was the day we managed to misnet some of them, so we captured them and managed to put colour bands on them, which was like a huge victory for my project because at the densities that I was seeing them before then, that was going to be really difficult.
Yeah, right. So mostly just the floodplains that you're finding them in, or is that kind of a specific habitat requirement for them at this stage, that as far as you guys know?
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, we have no records of yellow chats ever being anywhere but the floodplain. But we can only access them during the dry season when the floodplains are dry. When they fill up with water, like they are right now, we have no idea how the chats are using their environment because it would be totally different, and we can't get out there. We can't get out there right now because it's full of water.
Right. So if there is seasonal variation, just the impossibility of Northern Australia, Kakadoo, and just the wild parts of Northern Australia make it a little bit harder to survey.
Definitely. I mean, you've got the floodplains are full of crocodiles. Like, it's pretty much impossible to take a boat out there because of so many like obstacles and hazards. And that's why GPS tracking would be so useful. But unfortunately, I'm told that the technology is still 5 to 10 years away for birds of this size. So a little bit early right now, but I think in the next decade or so, we could get some really good data on what the hell they do when the whole environment is full of water.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's very interesting that we don't really know what they're doing during that wet season, but hopefully, as that technology improves, you guys get some really cool data. Very, very interesting, man. Is there much hope for that in the future to get some more data loggers out there, or are they really at this stage still too small and too much of a burden to put on those little birds?
Yeah, I think unfortunately for the sort of the scale of my PhD, I've probably only got about 2 years left. I don't know if we'll be able to get the trackers on then, but yeah, hopefully in the coming years we should be able to get something done. All right.
No worries, Robin. Thank you so much. This has been super interesting. Look, you guys can, as always, check out these projects at TSR_Hub. Is there any other social media where people can follow you and check out what you're doing, or they can just look up the Threatened Species Recovery Hub and you'll pop up?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the Threatened Species Recovery Hub, and you can also go to the Charles Darwin University website. I got a bit of a bio there, contact details, that stuff. But yeah, I'm actually pretty bad at social media at the moment. Something I got to improve, because people want to know about this bird, and I'm not doing a very good job of letting them know.
Hey, well, look, that's what we're here for. Hopefully we can help. But that's right, everybody go check out the Charles Darwin Uni. They do some fantastic work up there as well. Robin, thank you so much for talking to us, man. This has been super interesting.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No worries, guys. We'll talk to you soon as we have some other nerd that we can corner in with our microphones. All right. Cheers, guys. Okay. We've got Mr. Andrew Rogers here, another one of the awesome early career researchers for TSRH. How you doing, man?
Hey, yeah, good.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I hear you're an invasive species ecologist and pretty much an ornithologist as well, so studying birds.
Yep, that's right. My research is looking at the impact of invasive birds on the native species. So that's all of the parrots and pardalotes and all the cute, pretty things that live in the cities here.
Yeah, right. So, like, Australia actually has, everybody knows the Indian myna, right? And then we've got several species of native myna here as well, which are not exactly related. How many invasive birds do we have here to worry about other than the myna?
Oh, that's a good question. Right. So we've got a whole heap of European species, right? So that's things people are familiar with. Indian myna, also called the common myna. There's the European starling, which is really widespread. There's house sparrows, are also cavity nesters. And then there's a whole heap of Australian species that have been moved outside of their historical range. So you've got rainbow lorikeets in WA, in Tasmania. They didn't used to be there.
Okay, they've been established that far abroad from their natural habitats.
Yeah. And so they have all sorts of impacts on the species in WA, that sort of stuff.
What's the invasion route for lorikeets?
Pet trade.
Yeah. Oh, pet trade. So people are buying them in the pet trade, and then they're either being released or they're escaping, and then you've got invasive populations established outside of their home range. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that's true for the rainbow lorikeets, the corellas, the galahs have all been moved around Australia beyond the places that we have historical records for them.
Wow, that many native species have invasive populations even within our own country.
Yeah, and it's all because they're good pets, right?
They are. They're all beautiful and fantastic.
Gorgeous. Yeah, really, really pretty. But so like down in Tasmania, right? Species that's all over the East Coast, the laughing kookaburra, never occurred in Tasmania, and it's been introduced there, but nobody's studied it, right? So there's all sorts of interesting things that people have moved around that we just don't know a lot about.
So even the kookaburra got moved across the strait.
Yeah, there were a whole heap of things that were introduced to Tasmania. They've got like invasive lyrebird and stuff down there. It's really wild. Like people moved everything around, and some of it made it. Yeah.
Wow, invasive lyrebirds. That's fascinating.
Yeah. I think they're just in the really wet parts of Tasmania.
Somewhere where the habitat is obviously suitable for them.
Yeah, but I think so. My research with NESP focuses on the island of Tasmania and the impacts of invasives down there. So there's 6 or 7 invasive hollow nesting birds down there that have established, and there's the charismatic threatened species such as the swift parrot,
and the yellow bellied, and the eastern ground parrot, and all these amazing, beautiful birds that you have down there.
Yeah, and so we're trying to figure out where and when these unstudied invasives have had an impact on the native birds down there.
That's fascinating. Are you guys getting a lot of data and results yet, or how? I guess you're getting towards the end of your PhD at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm supposed to be finishing soon. That's what I keep telling my supervisors. So it's definitely gonna happen.
Keep telling him that.
Yeah, but so what we're doing to fill this sort of knowledge gap, right, is we're using species traits to model their breeding niche.
Okay.
And then we're looking at the overlap in that breeding niche as a proxy for competition. So we can estimate how intense the invasive species are likely to compete with native species for that breeding space.
Right, so you're assessing their competitive impact.
Yeah, and then we're collaborating with all the guys down there that are doing the swift parrot nest box research and the horned-bellied parrot research to verify what we're seeing in the model is actually happening in the field.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you mentioned there's 7 invasive species in Tasmania in total. Is that right?
Yep. So there's the galah, corella, laughing kookaburra, the rainbow lorikeet, the starling, the myna, and then the sugar glider is the mammal that has been eating the swift parrots. Yeah.
Wow. So the sugar glider introduced over there, or?
Yeah. So they recently did the genetic analysis for that, and they found that it's much more related to the South Australian populations than it should be. So yeah, it's a non-native mammal.
So look, they're very interesting. Out of those 8 animals you mentioned, 6 of them are native.
Yeah. So I think
native to Australia, essentially.
Yeah. So I think that there are two non-Australian invasive hollow nesters down there. So it's the starling and the common myna. The starling is the only one that's got breeding, that's established breeding populations, and we have confirmed incidences of it competing with swift parrots for nesting space.
Wow.
But we really don't know what sort of impact that has relative to the other threatening processes for those birds, like habitat loss and predation by the sugar gliders.
Which is often, habitat loss and degradation, obviously usually the main driver of habitat loss, but these other, factors and variables do need to be accounted for and understood.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what my research is attempting to do is to use these models to understand the species competition. And we're using Tasmania as a case study because it's got charismatic threatened species that really need protection. But the ultimate goal is to build these models that are general enough that we can apply it to the rest of Australia.
Okay.
Right. So if you think of the common myna and the European starling, they're all over the entire east coast of Australia.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're absolutely everywhere. And most of the studies on these species are from a few cities down south, right? So like they've invaded tropical habitats all the way through Tasmania. And so we're trying to build these models that you can predict, like, okay, up in the tropics, they'll have less impact, for example. But, down south where you've got these threatened parrots, that's where you want to focus your research attention and management.
Right, so you're looking at these distribution models to see where you're going to need to have the most conservation effort, or maybe get the most conservation bang for your buck because of the amount of species distributions that are in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to figure out a way to predict where these really widespread species are going to have the greatest impact, so we can focus our efforts there.
Okay, and how's that progressing? Do we got any interesting results so far that we can discuss?
Well, so the models worked for Tasmania.
Hey, very cool.
Yeah, so we're running those now, and we're in the final stages of tuning those up, and then the next step will be applying it to the mainland.
Yeah, right. Okay, and is there? Do you have any target species that you're already interested in applying them for, or is that all yet to come and in the future?
No, so once the model's up and running, we can do it for all cavity nesting species.
Ooh, wow, all cavity nesting birds.
Yeah, all cavity nesting birds we have all the data for. So yeah, once the Tassie stuff done, we can just plug in the rest of Australia and it'll be good to go.
Wow, that's really awesome. And when is that going to be happening? When are we plugging in the rest of Australia?
Yeah, so I'm all the work will be wrapped up in the next few months here. So we'll know pretty quickly where and when the invasives are having a big impact on Australia's species.
Awesome. That's super fascinating and very, very relevant as far as invasive species and conservation.
Yeah, I pretty much solved the problem.
Well, look, after you guys have got the model out and applied it across the board, if you guys do want to come on and talk a bit more specifically, of course, all the TSRH people, we always love having you guys on the show, so you're more than welcome back on.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll see you in a few months.
All right, no worries. Guys, that's been Andrew. He's finishing his PhD very shortly, and we're going to try to, I guess, find somebody else to tangle up in our mic cables and have a bit of a chat to. Thank you so much for joining us, man. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, man. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Cheers, bye. Okay, we're here with Matt West. He's a postdoc down at, is it the Melbourne University that you're at?
University of Melbourne, that's right.
University of Melbourne. And he's obviously, again, with the Threatened Species Recovery Hub, and you're working on spotted tree frogs, is that correct?
That is, yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so spotted tree frogs, tell us about them.
So spotted tree frogs are an critically endangered species that we've been monitoring for the last 25 years. And over that period of time, we've been trying to find out, essentially what might be driving the decline of this frog. There are essentially two main threats that are linked to the decline of this species. Firstly, chytrid fungus and non-native fish species.
Wow, okay, so obviously chytrid fungus, a major driver of population declines in Australia and probably globally?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. It's having a devastating effect on Australia's frog population and many other frogs throughout the world.
Yeah, okay. And the non-native fish issue, I guess it's just another case of introduced species, is it? Or?
Yeah, so some of these non-native fish species were introduced for recreational fishing purposes. But there are four main species that occur in many of the streams of the spotted tree frog: European carp, redfin, and two trout species, in particular brown trout and rainbow trout. And so those rainbow trout are really important for recreational fishing. People are not so keen on the carp species, but all of those four species look like they predate upon the larval or tadpole life stages of the spotted tree frog.
Wow, so they all potentially have some kind of negative impact.
They do, and so some of the experiments indicate that these non-native fish species love to eat spotted tree frog tadpoles, whereas the native fish species do not eat the spotted tree frog.
Wow, is it just the spotted tree frog, or is it other frogs as well that are at risk from these non-native species?
There's probably a couple of other frog species as well, but the research that I'm doing is particularly focused on the spotted tree frog itself. Yeah. So I guess what we've really sort of teased apart is that whilst these non-native fish species are having a devastating effect on the larval life stages, the early life stages of the spotted tree frog is also being hit by this chytrid fungus disease as well.
So the chytrid fungus obviously typically a lot of the time affects osmosis, water regulation in the skin, being a skin fungal thing, and that's mostly affecting the adults. And then as juveniles, as tadpoles, they're being hunted down by all these non-native fish. So that's two different parts of their life history where they've got a different pressure. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what we've found is that it looks like spotted tree frogs may be able to cope with one of these threats, but they certainly can't cope with both. So we're really trying to we're looking at options now to try and manage one of those threats. And to be honest, in these stream environments, it is particularly difficult to manage a pathogen like chytrid fungus. And so the non-native fish species are really the only technically feasible threat that we can manage in these systems.
So that's going to be like your most, not only the most effective, but maybe the only management option that you guys can kind of feasibly look at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. But it's not a simple solution either. So where there's these non-native fish species occur in absolutely every stream in which a spotted tree frog still occurs. We're currently working with some of the recreational fishing groups and talking to them about options about potentially managing some of these non-native fish species at a couple of spotted tree frog sites, the most important spotted tree frog sites. And you know what? These recreational fishing groups are fully behind us now. It's absolutely fantastic. We're very, very pleased with the relationship that we've been able to build up with these guys now, and it looks like we'll work towards a solution.
That's fantastic. Look, there's I know that there is a lot of recreational fishing societies out there, and a lot of them actually have quite a respect for you actually see them posting a lot of photos of local wildlife and having a decent amount of respect for even things like snakes, which a lot of people even including a lot of recreational fishermen see as kind of something negative. But then these native fish societies, they always understand that these things are always an important part of the ecology. Or so it seems.
Absolutely. I mean, even the recreational fishers that are interested in fishing species like trout, they all realise that these streams are healthy places to go fishing, and so they're right behind these actions to try and help these threatened frog species.
Yeah, that's very cool. Is there many other frog species in the area that you work with as well, or is it mostly the spotted tree frog that you're studying currently?
So most of my work's on the spotted tree frog, but look, I'm also involved in a couple of other projects that are more around the disease issue, but also many frogs are also affected by habitat loss as well. So another main project that we're sort of working on at the moment is for the bell frogs. So there's the green and golden bell frog.
Yeah, the green and golden bell frog from down in Victoria, absolutely gorgeous.
Yep, and also the growling grass frog in Victoria as well. I mean, both of those species occur in eastern Australia, but there's another bell frog species that occurs in Western Australia as well. There's a couple, but one in particular called the motorbike frog.
That sounds cool.
Absolutely. I mean, its name is as a result of sounding like a motorbike. Two-stroke. And so we were looking at the motorbike frog and trying to understand why that frog appears to be thriving over in Western Australia, even though it's very closely related to the growling grass frog and the green and golden bell frog.
Which both seem to be struggling, I believe, due to chytrid?
Due to chytrid, but also habitat loss, primarily habitat loss probably, although chytrid is having an impact as well. And so, all of those three species are affected by the same threats. But, so we're hoping to understand, what are the conditions that allow motorbike frogs to thrive, and are any of those conditions going to help the two threatened species? So, the growling grass frog and the green and golden bell frog. Yeah,
right. So seeing if that research can, help carry over to conservation in other species as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, dude, that's fantastic stuff. And is it Melbourne University that you're at? Where were we studying? Melbourne Uni?
Yep.
All right. And people can find them on Twitter, Google, Instagram?
Yeah, probably all of those places.
Yeah, just Google Melbourne University and you'll find them. Matt, thank you so much for talking with us, mate. I know it's been very brief, but look, if you're ever keen to come back on the show, we'd love to have you on.
If you're offering cake, I'll be there.
There's always cake and cocktails whenever we can have them. All right, guys. Well, I think that might have to be almost it for our conference times. We might have to hit the old dusty trail. It's been a long night. It's starting to get cold and probably going to start storming out there fairly shortly. But hey, we did even get a chance to go out for a quick herp and look at some leaf-tailed geckos while we're out here. How was that?
It's fantastic. Thanks, mate.
No worries, mate. Anytime. Guys, we are going to get on out of here, get on the road. Christian, how's your day been, mate?
Oh, a long day, Yanni. Long day, and I'm really hungry, man. But it's definitely been worth it, and it's very, very stimulating. Hey, learned a lot, just from today alone. Hey,
yeah. Look, so many awesome, inspirational people here, and guys, check them out at TSR_Hub on Twitter or at NESP Threatened Species on Facebook. Guys, we'll be getting back to you very shortly with some more wildlife cake and cocktails. I'm your host, Yanni Torkola, and we'll be talking soon. Cheers. Bye. Bye.